They rejected a single dad at a job interview, until he solved the CEO's biggest problem in seconds. The lobby of Calder and Rowe Financial Consulting smelled like polished marble and expensive cologne. Everything echoed, footsteps, murmured conversations, confidence. Ethan Cole stood just inside the glass doors, holding a thin manila folder against his chest like it might shield him from being seen too clearly. He didn't belong here. Everyone in the room knew it. His jacket was clean but old, the kind that had been dry cleaned too many times. The sleeves were slightly short, revealing wrists roughened by years of warehouse work. His shoes were polished carefully that morning, but no amount of polish could hide the cracks along the sides. Across the lobby, men and women in tailored suits moved with the ease of people who had never worried about rent being late or groceries being calculated down to the dollar. They laughed softly, checked watches that cost more than Ethan's car, and nodded at the receptionist like this place was an extension of their living rooms. Ethan shifted his weight and checked his phone. 9:12 a.m. His interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock. The receptionist finally looked up. Her smile was polite, practiced, and stopped just short of her eyes. Name? Ethan Cole, he said quietly. Interview. Data operations. She scanned the screen, then glanced up, slowly. Her eyes flicked from his shoes to his jacket, then back to her monitor. 4th floor, she said. Conference room C. No welcome. No encouragement. Just directions. Ethan nodded and walked toward the elevators, feeling every step. Inside the elevator, mirrored walls reflected him back at himself. A man in his mid-30s. Tired eyes. A face that had aged faster than it should have. He thought of his son, Noah, still asleep on the couch back home. 7 years old. Sprawled sideways, blanket half on the floor. Noah had smiled in his sleep when Ethan kissed his forehead before leaving. Be good for Mrs. Alvarez, Ethan had whispered. Noah hadn't woken up. He never did. The elevator dinged. Conference room C was already full. 4 people sat on one side of a long glass table, tablets and leather notebooks neatly arranged. Bottled water stood untouched in front of each of them. They didn't stand when Ethan entered. The man in the center, silver hair, crisp navy suit, glanced down at a resume on his tablet and frowned slightly. Mr. Cole, he said. Have a seat. Ethan sat. The chair felt too low, making him feel smaller than he already did. I'm Leonard Shaw, the man continued. Senior Director of Analytics. This is Karen Liu, Operations Lead. Marcus Bell, HR. And Danielle Wright, Senior Consultant. They nodded barely. Leonard didn't waste time. Let's address the obvious, he said, folding his hands. Your resume is unconventional. Ethan swallowed. Yes, sir. You don't have a college degree. No, sir. Karen leaned back in her chair. Our minimum requirement is a bachelor's. Preferably master's. I understand, Ethan said. Marcus from HR smiled thinly. Then perhaps you can explain why you applied. Ethan had rehearsed this answer 100 times, while stacking boxes, while washing dishes, while sitting on the edge of his bed after Noah fell asleep. I've been working in data operations for 6 years, he said. Not formally. I taught myself. I've built systems, cleaned large datasets, automated reporting for small companies. I passed your technical assessment. Danielle raised an eyebrow. That test filters out people who can't follow instructions. It's not a credential. Leonard nodded. Experience matters. But pedigree matters too. We work with Fortune 500 clients. They expect a certain standard. Ethan felt heat rise to his ears. I understand, he said again. Karen glanced at his resume. You left university? My wife got sick, Ethan said. I had to work. She passed away 4 years ago. A brief silence. Marcus cleared his throat. I'm sorry for your loss. The tone said otherwise. Leonard tapped the table lightly. Mr. Cole, we respect perseverance. Truly. But Calder and Rowe isn't the place for unfinished paths. Our clients don't pay for potential. They pay for credentials. Ethan nodded. I appreciate the opportunity, he said quietly. Leonard stood. We'll conclude here. That was it. No questions about his portfolio. No curiosity. No chance. Ethan gathered his folder, stood, and pushed his chair in carefully. Nobody offered a handshake. As he turned toward the door, he caught his reflection in the glass wall, out of place, already erased. His hand reached for the handle. That's when the building changed. A sharp voice echoed from the hallway. Leonard, get everyone. Now. The door burst open. A woman in a charcoal suit stood there, phone pressed to her ear, color drained from her face. The Mercer account just froze funding, she said. Legal's on the line. Their CFO says our risk model is flawed. Leonard's posture stiffened. That's impossible. They're threatening to pull the entire contract, she said. $18 million. Karen stood abruptly. That model was reviewed 3 times. Danielle was already pulling up her laptop. This can't be happening. Phones started ringing. Voices overlapped. Calm dissolved into controlled panic. Ethan stood frozen near the door. On the large screen in the adjacent conference room, a dashboard flickered to life. Charts, projections, risk exposure graphs. His eyes locked onto one graph. And in seconds something felt wrong. The curve was too smooth. The variance too clean. His mind started moving on its own. The risk model was weighted heavily on transaction frequency, but frequency didn't equal stability, especially not with automated microtransactions. And the outlier suppression algorithm, it was aggressive. Too aggressive. It was flattening volatility that should have been there. Hiding risk. Ethan's chest tightened. They were underestimating exposure by a massive margin. He could see it as clearly as if someone had highlighted it in red. His hand tightened on the door handle. If he spoke, they'd laugh. If he was wrong, he'd confirm every assumption they'd made about him. He thought of Noah. Of the couch. Of the way Noah pretended not to notice when Ethan skipped dinner. Ethan turned around. I think your model is suppressing volatility incorrectly, he said quietly. The room went silent. Leonard stared at him. What did you say? I think the risk model is flattening exposure by filtering out transaction clusters that shouldn't be filtered. Karen scoffed. You glanced at a screen and diagnosed an enterprise model? Danielle crossed her arms. We've been working on that system for months. Leonard's voice hardened. Mr. Cole, you've already been rejected. I know, Ethan said. But I think your problem is in the weighting logic. Marcus stood. This is highly inappropriate. Before anyone could say more, a calm voice cut through the tension. Let him finish. A woman stepped into the room. She was older than the rest. Calm. Controlled. Her presence shifted the air. Evelyn Rowe. Co-founder. CEO. She looked at Ethan, not dismissively, not kindly. Assessing. You're saying our risk exposure is understated, she said. Yes, Ethan replied. Because your system treats frequent low-value transactions as stability. But those clusters are masking churn and compounding liability. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. 2 minutes, she said. Explain. Leonard stiffened. Evelyn, 2 minutes, she repeated. Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding. He pointed to the screen. You're using a rolling average that suppresses variance beyond a threshold, he said. It makes the model look clean, but it's hiding risk. Mercer's CFO probably saw a discrepancy between your projections and real exposure. Silence. Danielle pulled up the raw data. Her face changed. Leonard leaned closer. Evelyn didn't move. After a moment, Danielle whispered, he might be right. Ethan exhaled, slowly. Evelyn turned to him. Stay, she said. You're not done yet. If this story made you feel seen, if you've ever been underestimated or quietly carried more than people knew, subscribe to the channel. Next part reveals the cost of being given a chance, and how hard the system fights back when you don't fit. The room didn't breathe again until Evelyn Rowe spoke. Conference room A. Now. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight, the kind that didn't need to be raised. Leonard recovered first. Evelyn, with all respect, this is highly irregular. He's not an employee. He doesn't have a degree? Evelyn finished for him, eyes still on Ethan. I can read his resume, Leonard. She turned and walked out. No one argued. Ethan followed, his legs heavy, his pulse loud in his ears. Conference room A was larger, darker, designed for board meetings and quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A room meant for people who belonged. Ethan stood near the door, unsure where to sit. Stay standing, Leonard said sharply, as if to remind him. Evelyn ignored that. Explain again, she said to Ethan. Slowly. Ethan nodded, swallowing the dryness in his throat. He spoke carefully, choosing clarity over confidence. The volatility suppression threshold in your risk model is too aggressive. It treats frequent microtransactions as stability instead of noise. That smooths the curve, but it hides compounding exposure, especially in accounts with automated activity. Danielle was already typing. Karen shook her head. That algorithm passed every validation test. Because the validation data is structured the same way, Ethan said. It reinforces the assumption. Leonard laughed without humor. You're saying our entire analytics team built a self-confirming system. I'm saying it happens more often than people realize, Ethan replied quietly. Silence. Evelyn folded her arms. If Mercer is right, how exposed are we? Ethan hesitated. Leonard pounced. He doesn't know. If I had raw transaction data, Ethan said, I could tell you. Evelyn turned to Leonard. Give him access. Leonard's jaw tightened. That data is restricted. So am I, Evelyn said calmly. And I'm authorizing it. Leonard hesitated, then nodded sharply. Temporary access. 2 hours. Ethan sat at the far end of the table, a guest in a room not built for him. Danielle slid a laptop toward him. Log in, she said. No warmth. No hostility. Just curiosity now. The data loaded. Rows upon rows of transactions. Patterns emerging like familiar constellations. Ethan's world narrowed. For 90 minutes, nothing existed except numbers. He forgot the room. Forgot Leonard. Forgot his jacket and his shoes and the way he'd been dismissed. This was where he belonged. Finally he looked up. You're underestimating exposure by 22%, he said. Minimum. Danielle froze. Karen whispered, that's not possible. Ethan turned the screen. There, he said. These accounts look stable. But they're masking churn cycles. When the automation breaks, or the user disengages, the drop is sudden and severe. Mercer's CFO likely caught it during stress testing. Evelyn studied the screen. Leonard's face went pale. Danielle reran the numbers herself. Oh my God, she said quietly. Evelyn straightened. How long to fix it? She asked. Leonard answered before Ethan could. Weeks. Maybe months. We'd need to rebuild the weighting logic, revalidate everything. I can build a corrected model in 3 days, Ethan said. Every head snapped toward him. Leonard laughed outright. You're out of your mind. I've done it before, Ethan said. For smaller systems. Same principles. Karen scoffed. This isn't a side project. Evelyn raised a hand. You have 72 hours, she said to Ethan. Leonard's eyes widened. Evelyn, if he succeeds we keep Mercer, Evelyn continued. If he fails we lose nothing we haven't already lost. She looked at Ethan. You don't get excuses. You don't get extensions. You don't get help unless you ask for it. Ethan nodded. Good, she said. Leonard, assign him a workstation. Leonard's voice was cold. Corner desk. Temporary contractor. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't need. To day one the desk was wedged between a printer and a structural column. No monitor arm. No ergonomic chair. No privacy. Ethan set down his folder and opened the laptop. He didn't complain. By noon he realized this wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of endurance. Access permissions were incomplete. Documentation was fragmented. Systems were locked behind approval chains designed to move slowly. Leonard walked by once, stopped, and glanced at Ethan's screen. You'll need level 3 clearance for that dataset, he said casually. How do I get it? Ethan asked. Leonard smiled thinly. You don't. He walked away. Ethan stared at the screen, then quietly rerouted his approach. If he couldn't access the dataset directly, he'd reconstruct it indirectly. Slower. Messier. Possible. By 7 p.m., most of the office emptied. Ethan stayed. At 9 p.m. he texted Mrs. Alvarez. Ethan, I'm running late. Thank you again. Mrs. Alvarez, Noah's asleep. Don't worry. At midnight his code failed. At 1:30 a.m. he rewrote it. At 3 a.m. he caught a subtle indexing error that would have corrupted the output. He fixed it. At 4:15 a.m., he leaned back and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Day 2 Ethan woke to the sound of the printer beside him. His neck ached. His hands trembled slightly as he typed. By noon, the new model skeleton was functional. By 2 p.m. he hit another wall. He needed historical stress test scenarios, kept in a legacy system no one used anymore. Access denied. He sent an email. No response. Leonard passed by again. Still here? He asked. Yes, Ethan said. Leonard leaned closer. You're going to fail. Ethan met his eyes. Maybe. Leonard straightened. And when you do, remember, you weren't wronged. You were indulged. He walked away. At 6 p.m. Ethan's phone buzzed. A photo from Mrs. Alvarez. Noah, asleep on the couch, homework spread beside him. Ethan stared at it longer than he should have. He turned back to the screen. At 10 p.m., he found a workaround. An archived backup of the stress tests. Older, imperfect, but usable. He ran simulations. The model held. Not perfectly, but well enough. At 2 a.m. he saved everything twice. At 3 a.m. the door opened. Evelyn stepped in. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You're missing the legacy exposure layer," she said. Ethan nodded. "I can't access it." She studied him for a moment. "Tomorrow night," she said. "I'll fix that." Then she left. Day 3 the pressure was heavier now. People watched him openly. Some with curiosity. Some with resentment. Some with quiet hope. At noon Danielle stopped by. "It's impressive," she admitted, nodding at his screen. "Thank you," Ethan said. She hesitated. "They're not making this easy for you." "I know." At 9 p.m., Evelyn returned. She handed him a printed badge. "Full access," she said. 4 hours. "Why?" Ethan asked. She considered him. "Because I've seen this before," she said. "People confuse credentials with capability. It makes them lazy." She turned to leave, then paused. "My father was a janitor in this building," she added. "He used to tell me which executives were lying based on how they avoided eye contact." She looked back. "Don't waste the time." Ethan didn't. He worked until his vision blurred. Integrated the legacy layer. Recalibrated the model. Ran validation after validation. At 2:47 a.m., the final test finished. Accuracy improved. Exposure stabilized. Mercer's risk profile aligned. Ethan leaned back exhausted. At 3 a.m., Evelyn returned. "It's ready," Ethan said. She nodded. "Get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow you present." The boardroom was full by 8:30. Not just executives, legal counsel, senior analysts, risk officers, 2 Mercer Capital representatives flown in overnight. Coffee went untouched. Screens glowed with dashboards no one trusted anymore. Ethan stood near the wall, hands folded loosely in front of him. He wasn't seated at the table. Leonard had made sure of that. "This is highly unconventional," Leonard said, already irritated. "We're delaying a critical negotiation for a demonstration." Evelyn sat at the head of the table, posture relaxed, eyes alert. "Mercer delayed signing," she said calmly. "That's not on us. If this works, we keep them. If it doesn't, we lose nothing extra." One of the Mercer reps, a gray-haired man named Collins, spoke carefully. "We were prepared to walk." "I know," Evelyn replied. "That's why you're still here." She turned slightly. "Mr. Hale," she said. "You may begin." Ethan took a breath and stepped forward. He didn't start with an apology. He didn't start with credentials. He started with the problem. "Your current risk model assumes stability based on transaction frequency," Ethan said, voice steady. "It works until automation fails. When it does, losses spike faster than your controls can react." Leonard interjected immediately. "That's a gross oversimplification." Ethan nodded. "It is. That's why it went unnoticed." A ripple moved through the room. Ethan continued, clicking the remote once. A graph appeared, 2 lines diverging sharply. "This is your current model under stress," he said. "This is the corrected one." Collins leaned forward. "What changed?" "The weight assigned to volatility suppression," Ethan replied. "And the way dormant automation is flagged. You treat silence as safety." "It isn't." Danielle spoke up carefully. "We reran his model against 5 years of historical data." "And?" Karen asked. Danielle hesitated, then said, "It holds." Leonard's jaw tightened. Ethan clicked again. Another screen, cleaner, simpler. "I rebuilt the logic from the ground up," Ethan said. "No shortcuts. No assumptions borrowed from prior frameworks." Collins exchanged a glance with his colleague. "What happens if we deploy this?" Collins asked. Ethan didn't rush the answer. "You reduce exposure by 19 to 24% across high-frequency accounts," he said. "And you regain credibility." Silence. Leonard stood abruptly. "This is irresponsible." He had limited access, no oversight, no peer review. Evelyn raised a hand. "Leonard," she said quietly. "Sit down." Leonard froze. He sat. Evelyn turned to the Mercer team. "You asked for proof. You have it. If you'd like, we can run your proprietary stress scenario." Collins nodded slowly. "Do it." The room held its breath as data streamed across the screen. Ethan watched the numbers, not the faces. The model held. Better than held, it adapted. The projection stabilized. Collins exhaled. "Well," he said, "that's unexpected." Evelyn smiled faintly. "We prefer prepared." Collins turned to Ethan. "You built this alone?" "Yes." "In 3 days?" "Yes." Collins nodded once. Then Mercer stays. The words landed softly, but they landed. Leonard said nothing. Karen stared at the screen. Danielle looked at Ethan with something like awe. Evelyn closed her folder. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," she said. "You've done what we asked." The meeting adjourned quietly. No applause. No speeches. Just resolution. Ethan packed his folder at the corner desk. No one stopped him. Until Evelyn did. "Walk with me," she said. They moved through the office, past glass walls and quiet stairs. "You could have demanded more," she said. "Leverage. A title." "I just wanted to fix the problem," Ethan replied. She studied him. "That's why you belong here." They stopped outside her office. "I'm offering you a position," she said. "Senior systems analyst. Flexible hours. Remote when needed." Ethan hesitated. "My son comes first," Evelyn finished. "I know." She extended her hand. Ethan shook it. "Welcome aboard," she said. That evening Ethan picked Noah up himself. "I thought you were working late," Noah said, climbing into the car. "I was," Ethan replied. "But not tonight." They stopped for burgers. Nothing fancy. At home they sat on the couch, legs tucked in, quiet. "Dad." Noah said. "Yeah. You seem lighter." Ethan smiled. "I feel like I can breathe." Noah nodded, satisfied. Later, after Noah fell asleep, Ethan stood by the window. The city looked different, not brighter, just closer. He hadn't conquered it. He'd found his place in it. The next morning Ethan returned to work. Not early. Not late. On time. He sat at a proper desk this time. No one questioned it. If this story made you feel calm, respected, and quietly hopeful, subscribe to the channel for more stories where dignity wins without noise. Some victories don't need to shout. They just need to last. And